Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CIA Columbia Law School event on Women in International Arbitration. We're so glad to have you guys on board today with us with a matter that deeply touches our heart because not only we're going to talk about diversity and how women can thrive in international arbitration, we are really keen to the tips our speakers have to us, and we are really glad that they could join us. On behalf of the CIAA, the Columbia International Arbitration Association, and the Arbitration Channel, we would like to thank everyone, and we hope you guys enjoy what our speakers have to share with us because we're surely very excited to hear what they have to say. My name is Elora, and alongside with Andrea, both board members of CIAA, we'll be moderating this panel with this amazing and brilliant women that Andrea will so nicely introduce now.
Thank you. So let's start with the first person on the screen that we see, Floriane. Floriane is a counsel for the International Dispute Resolution Group at Debevoise, New York, and she advises and represents multinational corporations and sovereign states in a variety of jurisdictions and fora on issues of civil and common law, public international law, treaty, and contract interpretation. She has been nominated for 5 consecutive years as a future leader in arbitrations by Who's Legal, in addition focused on a selection of outstanding attorneys aged 45 or under, and was recognized in the most highly regarded section of the Futures Leader list. Preeti is a partner at White & Case, specializing in international commercial arbitration and investment treaty arbitration, also based in New York. She has represented both states and investors and has served as counsel in arbitrations conducted under most major international arbitration rules. Her experience includes a wide range of disputes in energy, natural resources, financial technology, pharmaceuticals, infrastructure, and telecommunications sectors. She advises on a wide range of matters, including commercial disputes arising from M&As and shareholders' agreements, as well as disputes involving state contracts and issues of public international law. And finally, but most definitely not least, we have Jennifer Lim, who is counsel for the arbitration and trade team at Sidley Austin. She's currently based in Singapore, so thank you for calling in despite the time difference. And she has represented clients in investor state and commercial arbitrations. She's also an ex-Columbia LLM, the youngest of the 3 here, and she has broad experience advising on general transnational litigation matters, including arbitration-related court proceedings and complex cross-border disputes. Since 2009, she has been recognized as a future leader in international arbitration by Who's Legal, a publication focused on a selection of outstanding lawyers aged 45 or under. Jennifer has also been listed by Legal Media Group's Expert Guides 2021 is one of the rising stars in commercial arbitration. So now, without further ado, we'd like to welcome the 3 speakers for spending their time with us here today, and we'll start the discussion on women in arbitration.
Awesome. We separated a few questions priorly and also received a few questions from our students, but we also welcome you and encourage everyone who's watching us to type on the comments on YouTube. And in the end of this event, we'll have a Q&A session, and then we'll read some of your questions. The first question that goes, I think, for all of the speakers is to share about your own background and how you landed in this field of international arbitration. Maybe we can start with Jennifer, since she's joining us from such a faraway place. Jennifer?
Thank you. I think I was interested in the study of international law pretty much right from the beginning. That's why I went to study law, and through that, in pursuing that interest, I did the Jessup International Law moot court competition. And I think in the first year that I did it, there was an element relating to a bilateral investment treaty. And I didn't know what a BIT was. I was like, what is this strange thing? And I realized that people actually had practice groups based around, arbitration, international arbitration, including investor state arbitration. And pretty much that's how I stumbled into this world of arbitration, where I felt like I could pursue my interest in public international law and still kind of practice in the private sector.
Oh, this is refreshing because before coming to Columbia Law School, I have never, I'm a Brazilian lawyer, so I have never studied BIT. So as well, so it's nice to know that not everything is lost. Preeti?
Hi, thank you, first of all, Laura and Andrea and CIAA for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with Jennifer and Florian. Like Jennifer, I did the Jessup Moot in my as part of my undergraduate studies in the UK. I started my career in Singapore. I worked with a regional firm called Raja & Tan, started as a commercial litigator, but it was kind of at a time when arbitration was really taking off in Singapore, and very soon got immersed in international arbitration work, loved it. I did take a kind of 1-year hiatus from private practice and moved in-house. I was at Shell for a year, completely different world, but very, very good experience. And then I decided to do my LLM. I came to New York, I did my LLM at Columbia, and I joined White & Case in the International Arbitration Group right after that. I think I've been here now, I don't know, 8-9 years maybe. Yeah, that's, and it's been pretty much international arbitration from, I guess, my second year of my career onwards, with the exception of that 1 year where I was in-house.
Florian?
Hi, everyone. I just echo what Preeti and Jennifer said. Really thank you to both of you for moderating this panel. I'm very happy to be here today. Wish we could do this in person, hopefully next year. So the way I came to work in international arbitration is actually a bit different from Preeti and Jennifer. I actually started my legal career working in-house at the French oil and gas company Total. And at the time, the company was involved in a number of international arbitrations, both commercial, but also investment arbitration. And that's how I got to sort of be exposed to the world of international arbitration, was very interested, and I actually went back to law school after that and did a master at Paris 2 in dispute resolution and arbitration before joining Sherman & Sterling, where I did in Paris, where I only worked on arbitration cases for a while. And then I decided to do an LLM, so I went to UPenn for 1 year and joined Debevoise in 2007. So I've been there for many years now. I had an interruption of service for 2 years. I did a clerkship at the Federal District Court of Boston, which was also a very interesting experience, not arbitration related, but I also felt that the skills that I was building as a law clerk were actually very similar to the skills that would be necessary to serve as an arbitrator. And I rejoined Debevoise, I think it was in 2012. And since then, I've been only doing really exclusively international arbitration, both a mix of commercial and investment, as well as public international law matters, as you indicated during the kind introduction. So yeah, I look forward to discussing this more with all of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's really a range of prolific backgrounds that all three speakers have. And so maybe we just want to jump right into discussing the topic of women in the workplace and how the issue of gender inequality has evolved since you've started your career. I imagine, it's not always smooth sailing in general, and we just wanted to focus on the topic of women. So maybe Preeti, we'll start with you sharing about your own experience.
Sure, I'm happy to kick it off, and then obviously would love to hear thoughts from Florian and Jennifer as well. I think it has evolved in a number of ways. One is it matters a lot more than it did 10, 15 years ago. And we see that in really, I think, concrete ways. One is it matters to our clients. And there are a number of examples, but we have clients like Facebook who are demanding that women and ethnic minorities account for at least 50% of the teams that work on their matters. We have companies like Novartis that are withholding a portion of their fees, of law firm fees, unless the firm is able to meet commitments of providing at least 30% of billable associate time, 20% of partner time on their matters. And so I think this is where I see, you know, an opportunity for really concrete change, because, you know, if it's client driven, then the law firms are going to follow. And I see that in my firm and in other firms as well. And that pressure, I think, is filtering through to the level where firms, big law firms, are looking at diversity as a metric when they're considering promotions to partnership, right? Which I don't think was the case some 10, 15 years ago. So I think and there are good reasons for that, right? There's now a ton of research that has established time and again that companies that are diverse outperform their peers on profitability, on metrics that, you know, hard metrics that matter. I'm seeing clients demanding more diverse arbitrators. I was just on a panel earlier today as part of New York Arbitration Week, and one of our panelists was James Cowan, who is at Shell, AGC at Shell, and he's, you know, voiced the view that Shell sees this as an opportunity to demand more diverse slates, and you know, for someone who is on the client side to say that, I think it shows just how far we've come. So, you know, it matters to clients, it matters to firms, and we're seeing it in concrete ways. I think our entire approach to diversity issues has evolved as well. So whereas 10, 15 years ago, the conversation and the dialogue was about how women could achieve success in the workplace if they worked hard enough, if they were willing to assert themselves, you know, that whole lean-in approach. And now I think there's more of a recognition that the burden of achieving equality cannot just fall solely on women. We need widespread change at a society level to have meaningful change. And I think we're starting to see that recognition, and you're seeing that in the initiatives that firms have in place, things like unconscious bias training, inclusive leadership training for partners and leaders. And then another way in which I see the evolution is that the scope of the conversation has broadened. It's no longer just about gender, right? It's now we're having dialogues about inclusion of all historically marginalized groups, racial and ethnic minorities, LGBTQ, people with disabilities. And so I think those are some ways in which the dialogue has evolved.
Thank you. That is amazing insight, especially to know that the pressure is also coming not just from within the firms, but also clients that firms service. I wonder if, Florian, you also share similar experiences, both from within your firm and also when working with clients.
Yeah, I do actually. I think, you know, the situation has improved tremendously over the years, at least that I have been practicing. Both within the law firm environment and I guess awareness from clients about, you know, the need to change to improve the situation. And I echo what Preti said. I do have a number of clients, some of them that you cited as well, Preti, who are really very keen on driving changes and making sure that it actually happens. Unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I feel fortunate that I am at a firm, at Debevoise, where I think we actually have more female practitioners in our group than males. And that really applies to all levels of seniority, both at the junior, senior, and also at the partner level. We have a lot of women, so that's great. But I'm not sure that's true of every firm. And then when it comes to clients, as I said, I do have clients who actually demand having, when you present a list of arbitrator candidates, they say, you know, you need to have at least a number of female practitioners, female arbitrator candidates, but also, you know, more generally also more diverse arbitrator candidates. But that's not true of every client. And I think as lawyers, we also have a duty to really try to encourage, more clients to actually, realize that there is just still this really great inequality, I think, when you look at arbitrator appointments in particular, and really making sure that when you actually present a list of arbitrators, you make sure to include diverse candidates as well, whether it's a request from the client in the first place or not. I think it's very important. I do think as lawyers, we really have a role to play, and I'm sure that we'll talk about it, later on in the webinar. But I also see that there has been a number of organizations that have been created as well in the past few years. Arbitral Women obviously predated that time, but has been very keen on driving changes. I think the arbitration pledge has also, made a big difference. I was recently appointed to serve as a member of the USA committee for the pledge, which we're just launching at the end of this year. So I do think that all those initiatives, those movements, are really driving change. But more can still be done, and we should all work on this together, not only to drive gender equality, but to Priti's point as well, really broadening the scope and just making sure that we give equal representation, equal opportunity to diverse practitioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's also really nice to hear that not just from the clients or law firms' perspective, but you also have people coming up to create institutions or initiatives to help not just younger arbitrators, but like females or minority.
Yeah, I think that it's impossible to talk about women in international arbitration without talking about the initiatives. Florian just said, Arbitral Women, the pledge, Women in Arbitration. And that's actually one of the questions we have, but maybe Jennifer then can talk on that, also sharing her views on the questions that Andrea asked, but also how do you feel about the efforts taking the measures that are being taken? Because although we have evolved a lot, and no doubt that it was because of initiatives like that we are trying, but slowly, but maybe one day we will achieve equality. But what we've seen from the statistics is that this evolution is quite shy still. So maybe Jennifer can talk on that as well.
Sure, thank you. I think it's quite hard to follow from Priti and Florian and what they've said, because I generally agree with everything they've said. And I personally feel extremely fortunate and privileged to have worked. I used to work at Debevoise with Florian, so to have worked alongside, people I could learn from, people I could emulate like Florian. And then moving on to Sidley, which is a firm where there are many women in the leadership positions. And that was one of the factors that really kind of got me to join them, because I saw that they weren't just talking the talk, but they're, the people in their leadership were diverse across a variety of different, metrics, including gender. But having worked in New York and then in Hong Kong and then now in Singapore, I do think there might be some regional differences in just how far, we have progressed in terms of gender equality. Certainly, especially in New York and I'm sure in DC as well. I think people are very aware that this is an issue, and they really want to fix it consciously, right? They're talking about it, they're bringing it to the forefront. In certain parts of Asia, so it's not just limited to places like Hong Kong or Singapore, but more broadly, more regionally, I think it is still pretty common to, have to want to, for example, appoint male arbitrators. I have heard comments of female arbitrators being excluded precisely because they were female, or like panels at speaking events which are just exclusively male, because people just hadn't quite thought actively about trying to bring diversity to their panels. It's not as, I think it's a conversation that just isn't as just hasn't been said as much in Asia. I think that's changing, and I think that Arbitral Women in particular has done a lot to organize events regionally and in different cities talking about this issue so that we get participation on a regional level as well, people engaging in these types of conversations. But I also agree that a lot more work needs to be done. I think when it comes to all these initiatives and developments, I personally find it pretty encouraging because, again, this all helps to bring visibility to the issue of gender equality and diversity more generally. Maybe one of the things I personally feel is that it's almost like being in those organizations, you got to be a little bit more careful about how you act and how you present, because now you're kind of not just acting on behalf of yourself, but you're acting as a representative of one of those organizations. So when there's any controversy, relating to you and in connection with your work in that organization, or relating to that organization or initiative, it could, there's always a risk that could undermine the efforts and the progress that's been made by that organization. So it's definitely, generally a good thing to have all these initiatives, but you have to tread carefully. I think you are representing more than just yourself, but your gender or your ethnicity, your background.
Yeah, that's very true. And you kind of mentioned that you think more needs to be done. We just wanted to ask, well, what do you think could be done? And maybe if you wanted to share a bit more about your personal experience, developing your career in what seems to be a traditionally male-dominated field, and what hurdles you might have faced getting to where you are today.
Again, like from personal experience, I've been pretty spoiled because I've chosen to work at places that really care about gender diversity. So it's probably, one way in which top firms can attract female talent, right? By creating that environment for people to join. And that doesn't mean that, if you can't make it in a certain place, just leave. I think there needs to be, broader sort of public awareness and pressure, so that whether that's client-driven or firm-driven, for firms to want to retain female talent. And for that, I mean, one initiative that I thought was pretty helpful is the publication of the statistics on how many women have been appointed as arbitrators, because the people talk about that. People comment on that and they go, well, this particular arbitration center isn't doing as good of a job, or they aren't publishing certain statistics. Why is that the case? I think when there's scrutiny like this, it puts pressure on organizations to basically appoint more diverse candidates. Likewise, for law firms, I think, bringing in not just women, I suppose, to talk about gender equality, but also to get men, to get people who are currently in positions of power, to get them to participate in these kinds of conversations. Because oftentimes they're not consciously misogynistic. It could be, a question of unconscious bias, and it's no longer unconscious when you bring it out into the open and you talk about it. And so things can be done, when you raise that kind of awareness. I found it pretty helpful personally, instead of trying to fight it myself, to, have to have men participate in conversations like this, and to organize similar panels, but ask to have other women speak in that. It's again not so much about just helping yourself, right? But when you help to support other women, and women are helping to support one another, and you're getting men to also participate in these conversations, that's how we make broader change beyond personal advancement.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because 2 points that were mentioned. Sometimes that both of the three of you are so proud of your firms, and that give us some comfort, because sometimes, as you would mention, the law firm can say, "Oh, I signed a pledge," but then when you enter in international arbitration practitioners, men, you don't see yourself. And as a woman, this is my personal view, just a disclosure. it's hard to you see yourself in the finish line in a law firm and in a leading position when you look at the status quo, at the picture on how it is today, and you don't see female senior associates or partners. So and another thing that Jennifer mentioned, the statistics, because one may think, no, now we have those initiatives and arbitral women, and now things are going to change. But then this beautiful job made by the arbitral institutions show that wait, let's not we have to do more. We have to do more. We're getting there, but as you mentioned, Jennifer, sometimes it's cultural. It depends on the place. The tendency to appoint only male, it's bigger than other places. And then we have to. It's sometimes, and as Florian said, sometimes is the job of the lawyer also give women names to the clients. Now we have to indicate and here are some names and introduce women in those names. And that's really a job that us lawyers have to do it. Now we have a question to Priti, which is picking up on what we were talking about with Jennifer. It's what inclusive efforts that you have observed that are most effective in promoting less attrition rate for women lawyers in big law firms?
Thanks, Laura. I want to just before I answer that question directly, I think I want to pick up on a point. I think that Jennifer raised. This idea of the moral imperative and how we're not seeing real change. I think what we're seeing more of now is that it's not just a moral imperative, but it's a business imperative, and that's why I feel like we're starting to see concrete changes. It's a business imperative because it matters to our clients, as I mentioned. And it's a business imperative because we are losing talent if we don't address the retention of women. And so there's a war on talent out there. And, all the big firms are have to do what they can to maintain top talent. And that includes women and that includes minorities. In terms of what efforts I've seen that have been most effective in promoting a lower attrition rate, I think there are a number of things from my own experience and from talking to my colleagues. A flexible work schedule is important. I think that we've come a long way from the days when FaceTime was required, right? And that's been the case for a while. I think COVID certainly helped it by showing everybody how effectively we can all work remotely. And it's important because, women, obviously, they're at the peak of their careers at a time when often they have young kids at home, like myself. And so, that flexibility is really important. Having women, firms have in place policies that allow women to stay on the partner track while working, say, at 50% or 60% for a certain time if they feel they need it. I think that's really important as well. Not everybody, it's not something that everybody's going to take advantage of, but some people may, for various circumstances in their personal life, feel that they need it, and that's really important to have. And I've seen, people who have made partner on that track at 60%. Enhanced paid parental leave, right? That's another one, and it needs to be not just women, but men having I just came out of a 6-month maternity leave. I have a 6-month-old now at home, and having that time is so important to be able to then come back and be ready to kind of move into that fast-paced environment again. What I've seen in my firm that I benefited from, that I see others benefiting from, is we have an 18-month pairing of women on potential track for partnership with partner sponsors. And the idea is that the partner sponsor is someone you have worked with, as an associate, someone who cares about your development, and someone who will support you on your career trajectory. And the results show that in 2019, in our firm, about 70% of sponsored women were made partner or placed on a definite partner track. And that's really important. I think that sponsorship is something that isn't given enough focus. You know, we all talk a lot about mentorship, but really we want to focus on sponsorship. And there is a difference. A mentor is someone who provides you with guidance and advice, but a sponsor is someone who is in a position to open doors for you, you know, to introduce you to the next partner, to call up the person in a different office and say, I've worked with this senior associate, she is excellent. You know, if you have an opportunity, I think it'd be great for you to get some exposure to her, and vice versa. That's what we need more of. I think it happens organically. I've, you know, obviously benefited from it in my own firm, but to have this as a formalized initiative within firms, I think it is really important. I've seen that kind of make an impact in my career and in others. Somebody else mentioned this earlier, having women in senior positions as mentors. I think, you know, senior arbitration practitioners who have had kids, who have succeeded, and to be able to bounce things off them and to have that role modeling, I think is really important to younger practitioners. And then, you know, some firms are now moving into actually setting targets, as I mentioned, of having a certain percentage of women and minorities in significant leadership positions, in their equity partnership. And I think that also is really important, and that's having, and then of course, all of these efforts, they don't go anywhere if there's no tracking of data and there is no publication, at least within the firm, of data, so that firm leaders can, you know, there's accountability, and firm leaders can look at the data and see how much progress has been made, and there's some transparency around, are we just talking, or are we walking the talk?
Oh my God, honestly, we were really impressed on your suggestions, because sometimes the discussion on diversity, gender equality is sometimes so theoretical that it's nice to see some practical ideas. I wonder if Florian have some of, it can also be a theoretic, don't be afraid, but maybe some practical ideas as well, as Preeti has mentioned, or something that you see in Debevoise and you seem so proud of the firm, that something that works on the firm really well.
Well, I think what works on the firm, at least at Debevoise, is very similar to what Preeti said. At least for me, as a mother of two as well, the flexibility in the work schedule was something that was very important, especially after coming back from maternity leave. I think we think of flexibility in the work schedule in two ways. One is, you know, after the pandemic, we can work from home and work from the office. That's one way. But also, when you return from maternity leave, being able to return, you know, at 60% or 80%, as Preeti mentioned, I think is really important, because you know, once you have a child, you don't know exactly, you know, how much appetite you're going to have to, you know, go back to the office and, you know, and work full steam on those cases. It's, you know, it's very challenging. And I think being in an environment that offers you the flexibility to sort of take your time and decide if you want to come back, and even at 40%, and then ramp up if you feel, you know, after you feel comfortable, to 60 to 80 to 100%, I think is really important. And that's why I stayed at the firm, really, you know, after coming back, not only once, but twice from maternity leave. I should say congratulations, Preeti, on the birth of your little one, because it's true, you know, it is challenging to be able to balance, you know, being a mother and being a lawyer. So I do think that the flexibility of the work schedule is very important. And the other thing is, you know, you talked about the sponsorship, Preeti. I really like the idea, because I think, you know, there's a lot that can be said about mentorship. There's a lot of programs out there about mentorship, but being able to actually have somebody who can not only be a mentor to you in terms of, you know, listening where you are in your career, but also be able to open those doors that will make a difference in your career, I think is really important. So I think those two are really key. And, you know, and I'm not sure that there's not a lot more that can be done in terms of words, But I think what really matters as well is actions of the firms, right? Because there's a bunch of programs, as I mentioned, mentorships and the like. But at the same time, we need to see what actually happens in practice, right? And so the fact that law firms are promoting more, diverse practitioners, whether it's female, mothers, is really speaks volume. And I think it helps when you're a junior lawyer and you see that somebody who is a mother is being promoted. I think it also inspires, people, the younger generation, to also want to stay. So it's not only about, words, programs, but also about actions. And I think law firms need to do both to be able to retain those talents in the long term.
That's very true, Florian. And yeah, I think it's so important that law firms highlight this, because it helps to overcome issues like unconscious bias, that you think someone who is away on maternity leave might not be able to work as hard or do as good a job after coming back. And it's really inspiring to hear how so many senior females in this profession have successfully done it and still end up in successful positions in law firms. We just wanted to ask how you three think that young lawyers in this profession can find good female mentorship in the field of either international arbitration or just law in general. Maybe Jennifer, you want to kickstart this conversation?
Sure. I think there are a number of mentoring programs organized by a variety of different, arbitral institutions or organizations. What comes to mind is Young ITA has a mentorship program. The Moot Alumni Association of the Vismoot also has a mentor-mentee program. And I think through participation in that kind of mentorship programs, you really get a chance to meet other people who are in the arbitration community. And I think you could probably specify that you want, some in particular female mentor, if that's what you would prefer. I think that, I personally think in terms of looking for mentors, you should look for a variety of different mentors, of course, to have female role models to emulate, but also to have male mentors, so that you also understand how they have developed their careers. And again, so that you could, have them on your side when it's your turn to come up for, for promotion or partnership.
Preeti?
So yeah, I think mentorship is so important, and Jennifer has rightly touched on a number of external sources. Arbitral Women also has one. I don't know if that was mentioned, but Young ICA had one, and I've participated as a mentor in some of these programs. But I guess I would say, again, in most big law firms, you will have some kind of a mentorship program, formal mentorship program. There's informal mentoring as well, right? And I think my experience has been that the most valuable mentorship relationships are where it kind of happens organically. And it only can happen organically if you, as a mentee, reach out and you ask for guidance, you ask for feedback, or you reach out to a senior associate or a partner and say, could we have coffee? I'd love to just kind of bounce some things off you. And I think that's what you need to take the first step. And I'd be very surprised if you don't get anything, other than, of course, no matter how busy the person is. So don't feel like because this person is so senior and is so busy, you can't reach out. I think they always make time. So, I think that's something to bear in mind. And then don't neglect male mentorship, right? You can get such great advice from a male partner who has kind of also seen a lot and been through a lot and would, I'm sure, love to support you. And I think if you don't have a mentor, start a mentoring program at your institution. And so I think that's another opportunity.
Okay,
I mean, not much to add. I think the four sort of mentorship programs that I was thinking about really have already been mentioned. I think Arbitral Woman is really doing a terrific job at this, especially for women, of course. So I think I would encourage all of you to look it up. It's very easy. You have access to it directly from the website. I think, you know, it's about being proactive, more generally speaking. I think creating those opportunities to get the advice that will allow you to progress in your career, whether it's through mentorship from an institution, mentorship from the people you work with directly, or somebody who is, you know, more generally involved in your practice group is important along the way. So yeah, nothing more to add to that. I think knocking on that door is important. So taking that first step, I think, as Priti said, is key. Don't be shy. The door will always be open. I'm sure there will always be opportunities to seek advice from more senior lawyers.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned quite some mentoring programs that I'm sure everyone it's quite aware of Arbitral Women, but Yangika was mentioned, even the Mood Alumni Association, which is also provides mentoring. And what you said, that be proactive, right? We have to go for it and seek this kind of guidance. And also one interesting point that was raised is about male mentorship. I had two great mentors men mentors in my career, in law firms and in law school, and it's great. You don't have to. It was great, and as it was mentioned, I think by Priti in the beginning of our talk, that the more diverse, the better outcome you have. So you have insights having insights of a woman, having insights of a man. There are different perspectives. So it's awesome to be able to have this different perspectives from different people, especially for us young lawyers trying to build a career. This is so important, and so many advices, great advices. So the last note we have here before Q&A, I think if you want to add on what was just said, is final advice for young lawyers in international arbitration in general, not just women target, but young lawyers. Yes, I have to open the floor to someone. Jennifer, maybe you?
I think be adaptable. You may have heard just from our various career paths that there isn't exactly always a straight path to success in arbitration. It can be meandering, there can be other opportunities. So yeah, in this kind of uncertain world, just keep your mind open and be adaptable.
Priti?
I think that a lot has already been said, but I guess I would say, don't forget the importance of just doing 100% on the immediate work that you have right in front of you, right? I mean, it's one thing to kind of think long term and be strategic about your career decisions, but ultimately you do good work, the next thing will follow. You keep doing good work and the next thing will follow. So just, I think, have that mindset of I want to be the best lawyer that I can be, and I'm going to, learn as much as I can, and then ask for feedback and implement the feedback that you get. I think that is going to be, generally safe, a safe approach for all young lawyers.
I assume I'm next. So I would say a couple of things. The first is, as I assume that a lot of people who are watching this webinar are LLM students or otherwise looking for a job, I would say my first piece of advice would be perseverance. I personally, received a lot of no's when I was applying for a job. I really did. And, it's a humbling experience. and you just have to persevere until you actually get what you want. So don't take no as an answer. Just continue and pursue your dream. That would be the first one. The second one is follow your passion. Do what, follow your heart, follow what you like to do in life. If you're interested in international arbitration, ask yourself, is it, why am I interested in that? What interests me in international arbitration? And if that's really what you want to do, then pursue this dream and do it with all your heart. And then the third thing I would say is it's just a job. So don't forget, that having a family and, being happy in your life will make you a good lawyer as well. And so I think it's just a matter of, I know that it's a job that can be all-consuming sometimes, but my husband always reminds me, it's just a job. Like, remember, you have to really make sure that you get your priorities straight. Your job is very important, and you're going to do it well. You're going to do it with all your heart, but you have to also make sure that you think of yourself and you think of your family. That's the advice I would give you.
That last point is so important, because there's no point, killing yourself, burning out, and then saying, all right, I'm done because I'm totally burnt out at a young, at a relatively early stage. And that happens not just to women, but men, right? And that's a big reason why we see drop off at the 3rd year, 5th year, 7th year mark. And so I think it is, so important to make your career sustainable for yourself. And then, of course, the law firm has a huge role to play in that as well, and making sure that our work is sustainable on a firm level.
Very nice, thank you. This was really inspiring. Yeah, right? Because we can relate to, we are LLM, so we can obviously relate what Florian just said, and it was such a really inspiring and motivational speech. It was really good. We have some final minutes. Maybe we can now open to Q&A. Do you want to?
Yes. So we have some questions from the LLM students, directed at, any of the speakers, whoever wants to jump on first. Our first question is what your opinion on blind appointments for arbitrators is, since we're on the topic of diversity representation. I don't know if anyone wants to just answer.
So I'm happy to kick it off. I guess I'm not, my assumption or understanding is that by blind appointments, they mean appointing an arbitrator where the arbitrator doesn't know which party appointed them. And, from that perspective, I think there can be value in that it eliminates it takes a burden, I think, off the arbitrator, right? Because the arbitrator doesn't know who appointed them, doesn't need to kind of demonstrate to the other arbitrators that they're going to be completely impartial, because nobody knows who appointed who. And so I think there's huge value in that. I guess from a counsel's perspective, clients often feel like that appointing the arbitrator is such an important decision, and one of the roles that's commonly accepted of a party-appointed arbitrator is that is to make sure that the arguments that are made by the party that appointed them are heard, right? I mean, for sure they have to do this for both sides, but I think also taking on that responsibility of making sure that the panel understands and hears those arguments. And so if you don't even know who appointed you, I guess you don't sort of play that role. But from a client standpoint, and from the standpoint of counsel who advise clients on appointing an arbitrator, I would be hesitant about that. I think when clients appoint an arbitrator, they generally want the arbitrator to be absolutely impartial, absolutely independent, but also to play that role of making sure that the arguments that they advance have been heard, have been understood.
Yeah, if anyone has any other comments, I think that was a very good perspective from Preeti. If not, we have another question from, I think this is a JD student. He or she just wanted to know what you thought the main difference between your work in international arbitration and those of, say, litigation or dispute attorneys, presumably in America, how it differs and how it's similar. Maybe we can start with Jennifer, who graduated as a JD student and then has since moved on practicing from New York to Hong Kong and Singapore.
Thank you. I think when it comes to arbitration, there's a lot more flexibility in the procedure, and the parties also have a lot more control over the process, right? Appointing arbitrators, or a choice of arbitral institution, and therefore the choice of rules, and even, whether or not they, even the shaping of the procedure, the timetable, and how things should be submitted and by when. It actually wasn't until I moved to Hong Kong that I found out there actually are two ways of presenting submissions. And in New York and in the US, it's very common to have something called the memorial approach, where you kind of present your submissions with all your evidence, all your witness and expert evidence. But in the UK and countries that still generally follow like the English legal system, many people prefer the pleadings approach, where you set out your statements, your pleadings essentially, and then you exchange that first before you go on to, the witness and expert evidence. So there's definitely a lot of variety that can occur in the arbitration procedure. Of course, one that's often cited is that for U.S. court litigation, and of course it also depends on whether it's state and federal, and which court in particular. There's also the extent and scope of discovery. And it's true, U.S. style discovery is a lot broader than international arbitration in just about any case I've ever done. Irrespective of the seat or the parties or the governing law, U.S. style discovery is still broader. Because I think at least in international arbitration, most of them now use the IBA rules as at least guidance. And so the document request sort of circumscribed by, the need to specify either a document or category of documents and the standards of relevance to the case and materiality to the outcome.
Yeah, okay. Unless Florian, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just to jump in briefly, I think Jennifer was really spot on in terms of drawing the distinctions, the procedural distinctions between arbitration and litigation. And I think maybe I'm happy to maybe add a little bit on sort of the similarities and really drawing this from my experience as a law clerk, as I mentioned earlier. I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of the skills that are required to practice, whether doing litigation or arbitration, because it requires what? It requires judgment, it requires analytical skills, it requires legal research, it requires drafting, and it requires advocacy. And I think whether you're doing one or the other, those are skills that you will learn through doing one or the other. And so I think perhaps that maybe another piece of advice that I would give as well to people who are watching us today is, don't necessarily be pigeonholed like too early in your career in wanting to do only international arbitration. I think to Jennifer's point earlier, which I think is a really excellent one, is keep an open mind about the opportunities. And sometimes the firm that you're going to be joining only has a couple of arbitration cases and does other litigation matters as well. And don't think that just because you're not going to do exclusively international arbitration at the beginning, that's a bad thing. I actually think that there's a lot to learn by being exposed to sort of different subject matters early on before you actually specialize as your career progresses, as you become more senior. And just knowing that, you know, the skills that I mentioned, drafting, advocacy, you know, essentially the same throughout. It doesn't really matter whether you do one or the other right at the beginning of your career. There's actually, I think, a lot of benefits to being exposed to a more sort of diverse subject matters early on. Thank you.
Yeah, this was really interesting because one of the other questions from one IL was, how would you advise ILs hoping to build a career in international arbitration? And I think that you just covered and just say it all. It was a really, really nice input. Now we're reaching to the end. This was amazing. On behalf of the CIAA, we would like to thank you three so much for this so nice inputs and advice. And it was really an enriching experience. We also would like to thank again Arbitration Channel for promoting this event and helping us with the live streaming. Was really good. Andrea, if you want to give some final words.
I think Laura has said it all, but thank you once again, the three of you, very esteemed females in the profession. You've given us a lot to think about, not just in terms of practice in international arbitration, but as young lawyers, LLM students aspiring to, well, hopefully have a long legal career ahead of all of us as well. Thank you once again for your time. And thank you to everyone at CIAA, Columbia, and Arbitration Channel. So I guess we'll conclude this event. Thank you.
Thank you
for being excellent moderators.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you both very much. And thank you to Priti and Jennifer as well for the conversation.
Pleasure. See you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.